You can take a flower, roll it up and make it fine. Sprinkle it with knowledge and a little bit of time. Cover it with headlines and a sweet euphoria too. Cannabis Man, Cannabis Man, Cannabis Man. Spreading news and joy across the land. Diving deep into the growing green. Cannabis Man, we're all keen. Ooh, yeah. Ooh, yeah.
Hello, and welcome into another episode of the Cannabis Man podcast. Thank you for clicking on the show. I'm your host, Don Kleppen. I created the show about 3 years ago now, a little over that, and it was just sort of a passion project, something I wanted to do. I've been a broadcaster for about 15 years, and I have worked on podcasts before, and I've been a cannabis user of about 20 years. I found earlier in my life it helped me get to sleep and stay asleep, so it kind of just made sense to me to keep it as a part of my life. And then as states around America and countries around the world have started legalizing cannabis for recreational use by those 21 and up, I wanted to help provide some information, some context and perspective. As more research is being done, as news is coming out about cannabis and concerning legal cannabis all the time, and this green frontier, as I like to call it, sort of changing every single day. And so I enjoy tracking that. It's something that I do in my work as a news anchor. And it's also something that I thought could be of use to people out there. And so that's sort of what this Cannabis Man podcast is. I speak with experts on the show, people who are in the space, whether they're doctors, prescribing medical cannabis, scientists studying it in labs, people involved in companies, entrepreneurs or CEOs, anybody who's, making or who has made a product or a service in the legal cannabis space, politicians who are creating or enforcing laws in legal cannabis spaces, lawyers sometimes to talk about those laws, as well as other people in the media or journalists who are covering this space as well. And in the past 3 years that I've been doing this show, it has grown to one of the top podcasts out there in the world related to cannabis. Listen Notes, the platform, has ranked it among the top of all 5 million plus podcasts that are out there. The Good Pods platform has ranked it in its top 100 all time in 2 different categories, indie news and society and culture, and cannabis commentary as well. The show's reached 90 plus countries, 1,700 some cities around the world, and all 50 states of the U.S., and I take that to mean that there is real interest in this subject matter, that there are people out there who are hungry for this sort of information and perspective, because regardless of what anybody's opinion about this is, it is changing. Society's relationship with cannabis is changing organically. And so something that has been prohibited since 1937 with the Marijuana Tax Act is now slowly coming into the light of legality. And I guess I'm just trying to provide some info, context, and perspective and just help that normalization journey along in my own way, hopefully, as much as I can. That being said, I always like to make clear that I don't believe cannabis is right for everybody, and when somebody tries it and tells me that it's not for them, I totally believe them. I don't believe it's some panacea for all of life's pains or, displeasures. It's a substance just like any other out there, and there's a wide spectrum of reactions. Some people are going to dig it, some people are not, and that's totally fine. But I do believe that there are many more people out there in the world who might be able to benefit from some of the quality of life issues that cannabis can potentially address if they were comfortable giving it a chance and experimenting with it even in small ways, but have been hesitant or totally resistant to doing so because of the messaging that they got from figures in authority over much of the last century and even lingering into today. Got a lot to get to today. Going to talk a little about some of what's been going on in my world over the past few weeks. There's a pretty important event in my life coming up this week. Also tell you about a product that I have been really enjoying, and it kind of ties in with a new segment that I want to debut on this episode, having to do with some food pairings that maybe you have stumbled upon while in an altered state. Some recent events and some future events I want to look forward to and tell you about. And of course, I'll wrap up some news stories, and my guest this week is CEO of a cannabis company in Missouri offering some really cool products and run by some legendary figures in the sports world. If you would be so kind, however you're listening to the show right now, Spotify, Apple, YouTube, whatever, leave a rating or a review. Make sure you subscribe to the show, comment, all of that jazz helps me continue to stand out from the crowd. You can follow the show on social media, and you can contact the show anytime via text or leave a voicemail at 872-269-2403. And with that, let's get into this episode of the Cannabis Man podcast.
This is Tommy Chong, and you're listening to the Cannabis broadcast.
Yeah, summertime is nearly upon us properly here. I guess it already is meteorologically, but the solstice, which I always kind of mentally think of as summer, although I guess it is a few weeks into that, but that longest day of the year that falls around June 19th or June 21st, one of those two, and there's just something like 14 hours of daylight or 15, something, ungodly like that, which is crazy. I always think of that as kind of the start of summer, although in America here, Memorial Day is sort of the unofficial kickoff of the summer season. A lot of schools get out at that point, and there's lots going on, especially around a city like Chicago. There's events every single weekend, street fests and art fairs, farmers markets, what have you, concerts and everything. And it's an exciting time. I hope you've been able to enjoy it wherever you are. And this past weekend, it was a really beautiful one, not just because of the summer weather, but it was perfect for my stepbrother Danny's wedding. I mentioned it a couple of weeks ago. He married the lovely Anila. It was a really special ceremony, and it was just really wonderful to see that. Weddings are just so great, and I'm such a fan of June weddings in particular, because that is when my wife and I tied the knot 2 years ago this week. So congratulations again, Danny and Anila. I hope you're enjoying your honeymoon right now, and we'll catch up when you get back. But yeah, that second anniversary of our wedding between Gretchen and I from 2023, that is tomorrow from when I'm recording this on June 11th. 2 years ago on the 11th, we tied the knot, and it has just been fantastic ever since. In that time, we've, both left jobs and started businesses, and obviously welcomed our daughter Violet into the world, and that's just been a wild ride, and it's just been kind of wonderful, full of change and full of stuff that I couldn't have expected, but she has just been a better partner than I ever could have hoped for, and than frankly I think I deserve. So I feel very fortunate and lucky and grateful that she's tied her life to mine, and I'm excited about our future together. So tomorrow we're going to go out to dinner, and my mom, Lolo, is going to watch Violet for a little while, and Grandpa Ray as well. Going to spend some time with her, and we're just going to go out and have some dinner. And there's a rooftop party at our building tomorrow night, actually. They sometimes do this in the summer when there's like a nice moonrise expected with some fireworks and stuff like that. So should be a really, really special evening, and I'm so looking forward to it. We also have a luncheon this weekend. My cousin Matt got married recently to the lovely Anna, and they went on their honeymoon and now are coming back. And since it was a marriage, they got married in Santa Barbara, so a lot of people weren't able to attend that wedding, and this is kind of our family's celebration of their union. And for this event, my lovely wife is actually providing the cookies, because if you missed this a while back when I announced it, she started her cookie business earlier this year, and she has just been knocking it out of the park. It is called the Lion Legacy Cookie Company, Lyon. It's a family name and kind of a nod to my mom's family's heritage. And Gretchen is making a bunch of lemon sugar cookies and these double chocolate chip cookies that are just both so stellar, very popular in the summer, and I am both proud of her and looking forward to this weekend, and because of many reasons. One, to celebrate the event, and also to get these cookies out of the house, because I really can't tell you how much of a test of willpower it is that I continually fail having cookies around all the time. every day. They're just there on so many surfaces of our home, within arm's reach, just calling to you at all hours. It's been brutal. You know, it's a tough road to walk, but I suppose somebody's got to do it, and I've just got to tighten it up. Just got to tighten things up, man. But I'm looking forward to getting those out of the house and having other people try them aside from myself. And I think my waistline will also appreciate that. But speaking of that, I had something occur to me, because recently, when I've been, not just recently, as a stoner of many, many years here, this has happened many times over the years. Certain cannabis strains give you the munchies. That's not anything new. If you're listening to this and you have experience with cannabis, you're very familiar with the munchies. It often can sort of strike some interesting cravings and maybe inspire some combinations that you would never really think of in an unaltered state, most likely. And earlier today, my wonderful wife was melting some chocolate chips to coat some strawberries because we were going to have a picnic outside, and I had an idea a while back to get some chocolate-covered strawberries, and we couldn't go out and get them, so she decided to try her hand at making them, and now she just makes them. And so that's just something that we kind of have from time to time, and she melted this chocolate, and I had sampled a product that I'm going to tell you about in a moment here, but I came back up, and I did have a fair shake of the munchies earlier today, and I was inspired to grab a slice of provolone cheese and just kind of dunk it into the melted chocolate. Now, you might be saying, hey, in Switzerland, fondue, Swiss cheese, Swiss chocolate, they do that stuff all the time. Cheese and chocolate is not necessarily an out there combination. And that's fair. I get that. But either way, it kind of inspired me to start this sort of new segment on the show that I'm going to be returning to. And I envision this as a segment I'm going to call High Minded Food Pairings, because some of the best food pairings can come from the high-minded. And so I'm just going to use it as an opportunity to kind of share some of the ones that occur to me, have occurred to me in the past, and will occur to me in the future most likely. But I also want to hear from you. What strange or amazing food combinations have you ever had over your stoner's journey? If and when, if you're, somebody who's into cannabis and has been for a while or whatever, I'm sure you've got those stories. If you're not familiar with this, maybe this will inspire you to do that. But I'm guessing that most of you out there probably know exactly what I'm talking about and have some interesting combos that you were inspired to try in the past. I want to hear about those. So if you hit up the show on social media, Cannabis Man Podcast Facebook page, YouTube channel, at C Man Podcast on all the other platforms. And of course, text or leave a voicemail at 872-269-2403. What is your favorite high-minded food pairing? Let me know. I'm working on figuring out how to maybe give a prize for the best answer. So again, feel free to reach out and share that with me. So earlier I did the provolone cheese and melted chocolate. These were kind of a mix of semi-sweet and dark chocolate chips melted in like a stovetop pot. And in the past, I have also done white cheese like provolone or maybe brick cheese, not Swiss necessarily, but something in that vein is okay. And I'll cover a chocolate chip cookie with that cheese. Effectively, it's the cheese and chocolate, but you also get that cookie in there. I love it. And this is stuff that, interestingly enough, even when I'm not stoned now, if I make that connection, if I kind of dig that neural pathway in the gray matter of the brain, if I establish a high-minded food pairing when I'm altered, sometimes that appeal sticks around even when I'm sober. Like, I'll eat cheese and cookies when I'm not stoned, and it still seems good to me. I'll tell you what, speaking of the melted chocolate, one of the frequent high-minded food pairing items that are featured in my altered states with the munchies are Cheez-Its. Now, I don't know if you've tried these, if you're familiar with these. It's definitely a classic American snack food of the last, 20 years or something. But they're just this unreasonably addictive little cracker. Just the right amount of salty and cheesy. And just in case there's any confusion, I am in no way affiliated with them. There's no professional sponsorship relationship here. There's nothing. I am just simply saying that if in my house the cupboards are bare and the fridge is borderline empty, there are likely still some Cheez-Its in one of the cabinets. And I took one of those Cheez-Its earlier and I dragged it through some of that melted chocolate that was in the stovetop pan. That was delicious. So it's not just cheese and chocolate, but a Cheez-It and chocolate too. That was something really tasty. So these are the kinds of high-minded food pairings that I'm kind of going for here. And I don't know why, but Cheez-Its tend to be a great addition to a lot of those pairings that come up. So that's the kind of high-minded food pairing I've got. Tell me about yours. I also want to tell you about the event I went to last night. If you heard last week's episode, you heard me talk about the Benzinga conference here in Chicago. It's an annual cannabis conference, mainly for networking and finance people to come in and just kind of look at businesses. And there are great panels, great guests, wonderful opportunities to just kind of meet people and see what's going on in the cannabis space. And there are, along with that, because it draws a global crowd, there are many great after parties across this 3-day conference. And there was a wonderful one last night, the Shy High Afters. It was their second annual Benzinga conference after party. I went to last year's, their inaugural one as well. This one was on a rooftop in the South Loop. Roots Handmade Pizza has hosted some of these events, and this was fantastic. Roots makes some great food, and there was plenty of that around. Bar was open, and there were lots of cannabis brands there, well represented. A DJ was keeping things pretty good, nice displays, smoke-filled room with the still lit sky kind of streaming through it there because it started at 7 and the sun's not really going down till after 8 these days. So it was really just a great vibe. Definitely at capacity, not a lot of room to get around in there, which was cool at times, and other times I think, it's a little bit like you got to get your elbows out to create some space. But a lot of great people in there, all there committed to having a great time and just kind of, another networking opportunity and people meeting each other. So many cool people in the cannabis space, and it offers opportunities to see what the newest products these companies are working on and meeting people who are maybe new in the space or seeing old friends again, like the man who put on this party for the Shy High Afters, Tony Shore. The guy knows what he's doing in terms of cannabis mergers and acquisitions, and he sure can throw a party. So nice job, Tony, and great to see everybody that I saw there last night. And it also gave me an opportunity to try some products. In addition to seeing all those great people and just kind of having a great time, there's a lot of cannabis products out there that, maybe you get a chance to try if you're having a good conversation with somebody and you get an opportunity. And I went home with a few pre-rolls from the Corner Boys brand. I have spoken with reps from Emerald Gardens on the show, which is the company that overarches and owns Corner Boys, the brand. They also have Tickled Pink and Bluminati and the Kranja brand as well. All good stuff. But these Corner Boys, I see a lot of their stuff out there, and they have some new exciting stuff coming down the line. I know that. But I was able to try one of their pre-rolled Gusher strain of joints. And I had this earlier today, actually. And though I've tried Corner Boys before, I had never tried their Gusher strain. So this was kind of a first for me, and I wasn't really sure what to expect. It's a gram joint, not super long, so it's convenient enough to just kind of burn through. I got through about half of it earlier and then finished it after dinner. This was harvested on December 15th of last year, which is really a little past when I normally prefer to be consuming these things, but it was only packaged May 2nd. Total amount of THC content is 32% with the THC and THCA in here. And I will say, I noticed something functionally that I had noticed about the Corner Boys pre-rolls before, which is that, like a lot of mass-produced pre-rolls, they do tend to jam up on you as you get more than halfway down the joint. The airflow through it whether it's because of the oil, the resin that kind of forms when you're burning it and you go through it. It happens in bowls. It happens with joints too. Sometimes, depending on the roll, that can impact your ability to draw through it. And it can usually be addressed by just pinching the joint with your thumb and forefinger, kind of giving it a roll to try and create some airflow back in there again, which is what I was able to do in order to finish the joint. But it's just something that I have noticed in my experience across the Corner Boys pre-rolls. So it's just something you got to know when you're going into them. That being said, I enjoyed the taste of this, and I really enjoyed the vibe of it. Kind of a nice reset button on the day. Had it around the 4:20 mark in the afternoon, just before dinner, which we sort of tried to do a little bit of a picnic outside. Violet was not having that. She did about 20 minutes. She was real good. And then it's pretty windy by the water there, so she just started letting us know this was a no-go, and we had to quickly pack up everything and head back upstairs. But before that, it was lovely, and as was the vibe I got from this Gusher pre-rolled joint from Corner Boys. It left me feeling fairly clear-headed, in a pretty uplifted mood. I wouldn't call it euphoric, but I definitely would call it pretty joyful. I was a little spacey. You know, my thought process was a little more sluggish, and I was just kind of prone to wandering tangents of the mind, but I wasn't necessarily inhibited from trying anything that I was trying to get done for this afternoon and the evening. And it did kind of put me in a good position to just really enjoy playing with Violet in the nursery when I got back upstairs. That's always something I kind of can be a little more present for when I'm using cannabis. You know, I don't find myself these days seeking a severely altered state. And as I've said before on the show, I mostly keep my consumption to after she's gone to bed. But there are definitely some days when I'll just, have a beverage or pop an edible or burn a pre-roll or a joint or something in the afternoon. Maybe she's down napping, maybe not. I usually take the steps to, of course, wash my hands when I come in, use some mouthwash, and sometimes I'll change my shirt depending on how much of the smell's been absorbed before I handle Violet at all. And my tolerance is such, and I've got the experience with it, where I usually know if I'm approaching a territory where I'm not comfortable doing anything, and I usually tag Gretchen in, and she's great about just kind of picking up if that ever happens, but it's pretty rare. And meanwhile, it kind of feels like my patience meter refills, my ability to just kind of take my mind off of the other things and just be present there, playing with my daughter. It's great. It's just become something I really didn't know, becoming a parent, exactly how cannabis was still going to fit in. I got to be honest, when Violet was born, I really didn't know if I was going to keep consuming or how any of this was going to go. And like I said, it has changed my consumption habits a little bit, but I find that it still definitely has a place in my life, and I kind of enjoy the balance that it helps me strike. And as I've said before, when you compare it with alcohol, for instance, at least I especially like that I don't feel like I'm sacrificing the day after. Whereas, for instance, after the wedding this weekend, I was definitely sipping on some Johnny Walker most of that evening. And cannabis helped diminish the hangover, I think pretty significantly, but it was definitely still there. And so I use that example to just kind of illustrate that I would prefer, for my particular balance that I'm looking to strike in my life, cannabis just fits a little bit better into it on a more frequent basis than something like alcohol does. And I feel like it does the things that people turn to alcohol for. And again, I'm not saying that it's this way for everybody. This is just my experience with it. Cannabis sort of, takes the edge off in the social way I might want it to, helps me relax at the end of the day. It helps me kind of maintain or increase my focus, and certainly helps my mindfulness and my patience when it comes to kind of, handling Violet and stuff. So for me, it has that added benefit. And I have found that for me, just like a lot of other areas in my life, cannabis helps in certain ways with parenthood too. Anyway, I know I kind of wandered off on a bit of a side note there, but either way, the Corner Boys Gusher pre-roll was really great. I'm obviously still feeling the effects of that a couple hours later. Still kind of spacey up here, but feeling good. Definitely something I enjoyed the vibe from, and you can find Corner Boys at most Illinois dispensaries, and I'm pretty sure that Emerald Gardens has some products elsewhere too. But if you type Emerald Gardens or Corner Boys with a K into your search browser, you should be able to find a store locator that'll get you to which dispensary they're in. And now let's get into my guest interview this week with Nick Rinella. And I want to mention before we get into this that Nick recorded this in a pool hall, I believe. And so it's not super disruptive, but you will hear in the background some pool noise of people not, swimming in a pool, but playing the game pool, billiards, like breaking balls and sinking them into pockets and that kind of thing. So just something to be aware of. It's kind of an undercurrent during the conversation, but like I said, I didn't find it to be distracting or problematic in any way. I just wanted to give you a heads up. And now, on to this week's expert interview. My guest today is part of a dispensary and a company that is offering some really important products to the state of Missouri. I love charting the different additions to legal cannabis around the country. Me being here in Illinois, there's been a lot made of legal cannabis over the last 4 or 5 years since we've been doing it, but I love seeing other states join the ranks of this green frontier. I love seeing it expand across the U.S. and in countries around the world. And with that expansion comes new offerings from different companies, from people who have been in the space for a while and creating excellent products for all of us. And this company was founded in 2019, and it's recognized as a champion of patient and adult use access in the state, along with education initiatives. You may know them if you're in Missouri. They operate dispensaries in Chesterfield, Columbia, and Springfield, and it's under the name Hippo's Marijuana Dispensary. And you might recognize some of the strains they offer, which include Sundro, Atta, Bad Pony, and Hugs. Those are all available, along with the award-winning Brett Hull number 16 cannabis strain. I'm guessing that is a nod to hockey, but I'll get that confirmed with my guest today, who is the CEO of Hippo's Cannabis, recently appointed as well to the Missouri Cannabis Regulation Collaborative, that's the MCRC, which helps to bring licenses and regulators from across Missouri to discuss the industry's most critical issues and emerging opportunities. I'm speaking with Nicholas Rinella. Welcome, Nick. Thanks for joining us today.
Hey, Don. Thanks for having me. That is a nod to the hockey in St. Louis. We actually have a production facility as well down in Vienna, Missouri. We have a 40,000 square foot production facility. So some of those different brands you mentioned, Sundro, Atta, Bad Pony, and Hugs are some of the different brands that we have. Sundro being our flagship brand, and we operate a glass roof greenhouse, which is essentially a indoor facility with a glass roof. So it's a sealed greenhouse. The only air exchange from the outside is through our HVAC system. So similar as any closed warehouse or anything like any indoor facility. And so that's where the name Sundro comes from our with our wholesale brand there. It's kind of where the sun meets the water. And to your point about the Brett Hull number 16, one of my partners and one of the investors in the company is the legendary Brett Hull.
Wow,
and
no
so
kidding.
We ended up developing a strain specifically for him and named it. We wanted to make sure it took us a while to develop that strain. We wanted to have something that was kind of fit him and with the legend that he is, and make sure that we have that out there. So that's where the Brett Hull number 16 came from.
I love it. That's fantastic. I know hockey's big in Missouri, certainly, but and elsewhere. It's, Blackhawks, a lot of fans here in the Chicago area, and just sort of, our indoor sports when it gets cold out. We all place a lot of value on those, and Brett Hull had a stellar career. And so let's just back up and talk about you, Nick. How did you get where did you get your start, and what brought you into the cannabis space?
So funny enough, you mentioned that you're out of Illinois. Myself, I'm originally from Illinois as well. And so back in 2013, I was in the beverage industry. I'm a fifth generation beverage distributor. And so I was reading a local newspaper and saw they're legalizing medical marijuana in the state of Illinois. That was back in 2013.
Right.
And that came across my desk. I was working with my father. I pulled up the article. I looked over to him and I said, "Man, Dad, take a look at this. We should make a crack at it." And so that was really, Illinois is really where my cannabis journey started, at least from a professional level. At that point, I went out to, I had a friend who had a grow out in Colorado. Colorado had recently legalized cannabis. And so, I already knew that I liked cannabis, I was consuming it, and I knew the benefits of it, or at least some of the benefits at the time. What I didn't know is if I had the aptitude to run a cannabis company and do cultivation, or even the dispensary space. I mean, I had my ideas, but I really didn't know for sure. And so what I ended up doing was I went out to go visit my friend who had that cannabis facility and worked with him for 10 days. I just stayed with him, worked with him, and just really wanted to check to see, do I have the aptitude to really pursue this, or is this, or I'm in deeper waters than what I should be. And so when I did that, I came to the conclusion at the end of my 10 days, like, well, if he can do this, I sure in the hell can. So I ended up linking up with some, different experts, growing experts. And at the time, you see it now, but I don't think it's as prevalent. Not that there's not charlatans still in the industry.
Sure.
But, if you could grow weed in a closet, it was more than what a lot of people could do. So it's like you're asking someone who maybe has a great home grow to then go build something on a commercial scale. And so, I was lucky enough to have a friend who had already started it. And so he had kind of had some of the missteps that I didn't have to experience. Not saying that there was no bumps in the road during the cannabis journey.
Yeah.
Because if you've been in the cannabis space and there's been no bumps in the road, you're either lying or...
you should brace yourself.
Or you should brace yourself. That is correct. Because it's coming.
Yeah.
So that's really how it started. I started off in Illinois. I applied for a couple licenses. Unfortunately, we didn't get the licenses that we applied for. And I had this great consultant out of California that I worked with, Avis Bilboyan. We likely should have won our licenses. Unfortunately, we had a lobbyist on the other side of the fence that was working with a company that ended up getting the licenses in our district. I believe he's involved in a RICO case with Mike Madigan right now. So
wow. No kidding.
It was who knew that Illinois had dirty politics, right? So.
We just can't seem to escape that moniker, and it's even today. We're sitting here talking, and that jury, those verdicts are coming down. It's the 12th listener that we're recording this, and that Madigan corruption trial is happening right now. Yeah,
I saw that. I think he was indicted on like 10 of the 17. Things ended up becoming guilty. So nonetheless, that's kind of where I started. I was working with these guys out of California. They reached back out to me about a year or so later, and I was keeping in touch. Hey, if you ever have anything in the cannabis space, I'd be interested in investing in or looking into. Obviously, it was real. Not that it's not in its infancy right now, because I do believe cannabis is still in its infancy.
Sure.
But back then, it really was in its infancy. We're talking 12 years ago at this point. And they came back to me and they said, hey, I think we have this opportunity out in California. So I wanted to take a look at it. And they ended up getting back to me, and it was about distribution. And so when California first went rec, it was a 3-tier system, much like the alcohol space. And that's something that I grew up in. At 14, I was working on a beer truck. So I really understood that 3-tier system. I've worked in the on-premise at bars. I worked as a distributor and ran our distribution company. And then I've also worked for different suppliers and different brands. So I've really worked in all 3 of those tiers. So I felt really comfortable and confident with my skill set when it came to the distribution piece. And with California and Governor Brown at the time introducing that 3-tier system, it made a lot of sense for me to work with these guys. And so when they originally called, I was thinking, okay, I'm going to do a little bit of consulting out there, and that'll probably be the end of it, and maybe I'll make an investment. What ended up happening was I moved out there full time, and I ran the first licensed distribution company in Southern California.
Wow.
So I know that it's not the exact path that everybody takes, but it's a similar path where it's you kind of think you're doing one thing, and next thing you know, you're in with both feet, and once you're in, you're in.
Yeah.
So that's really how I ended up in really getting deep into the cannabis space. Thankfully, the way that things worked out in California and being in a distributor, like I said, we were the only licensed distributor at the time in Southern California. So we worked with a lot of brands because you had to go through a distributor. You could not go direct from the supplier to the retailer, which in all honesty was a great thing for these smaller brands. It's when that evaporated that all those brands evaporated, and you see this in every CPG category. There's distributors in the alcohol space, and that's why when you go down the beer aisle, you have all kinds of variety, or you go to a liquor store, you have brands from all over the world. When you go to the soft drink aisle or the soda aisle, you have brands from 3 companies.
Yep.
Because they don't have to go through a distribution tier. So a lot of people, were kind of sold a bag of goods that wasn't true, that, hey, these distributors are taking your margins and that they're not good for the industry. Well, they're not great for the big guys because they can self-distribute it because they have the economies of scale to do that. They're great for the small guys who don't have the economies of scale. And so those guys all got pushed out in California. But because of that, we serviced, over 1,000 plus dispensaries, which there's not even that many dispensaries in the state of Missouri.
Yeah.
And so I got to, get a up close and personal look at all these dispensaries and see how they were operating and really their, kind of the do's and don'ts and their best practices. I also got to meet, some of the best cultivators in the world and some of the best manufacturers in the world, in California. And so that was great for really building my network. It was great for getting an understanding of, really best practices. And then, throughout that journey, I ended up, like I said, building my network. And while I was out there, I became good friends with a gentleman named Matt Cook. And Matt Cook was the chief regulator out in Colorado. And so Matt Cook, he was also instrumental in writing the legislation and the laws in many states, many legal cannabis states. And so he was working with a group in Missouri at the time that I became friends with them out in California. And you could start to see what was happening in California kind of unravel right before our eyes. I mean, I remember the whole tax collection debacle in California, and I was on a board with the CDTFA and talking to them like, how are we going to collect these taxes? Because the way that the taxes worked out there was the distributor collected the taxes from the retailer.
Wow.
After they sold which is essentially a sales tax.
Yeah.
But if they don't give it to you, they don't give it to you.
Yeah.
So you can't, we're not debt collectors.
Yeah, exactly. Like what authority, like how would you compel them to do that? Exactly.
Exactly. So it was kind of an odd setup, and I know things have changed since then, but they had some, really egregious taxes too. They were like at 19%.
Sure.
That was just the distribution tax, and there's other taxes on top of that. And there's a pretty robust black market out there as well. And so you could see things just unraveling quickly.
Yeah, I could see that. Yeah.
And so while that happened, my good friend Matt Cook reached out to me, and he was working with a group in Missouri. And I get a call from he sets me up with these guys, and he tells me, I've got these hockey guys in Missouri, and I'd like you to meet them, and I think you'd really enjoy working with them. And at the time, I'm like, Matt, I live in Hermosa Beach.
What is hockey?
This is gonna have to be something that's really compelling to get me to move. I'm here looking at the Pacific Ocean.
Yep.
And you're wanting me to move to Missouri. He's like, well, we'll give it a shot. So that's exactly what I did. And I'm trying to dig the information out of these guys. I'm like, well, who exactly are these guys? And at the time, I didn't know, admittedly, a lot of hockey players.
Sure.
I grew up playing a little pond hockey, had a little pond behind my house, but, I grew up in a small town in Quincy, Illinois.
Gotcha.
And so we didn't have, any indoor hockey, ice rinks or anything like that. It's like if the local ponds froze, you could go, get your ice skates at Play It Again Sports and go rip it up. But that was the extent of it. We did a little street hockey, from probably because we were all watching Wayne's World and wanted to be Wayne and Garth. But,
yeah, I remember that.
That was kind of it. And so I'm trying to get these players out of them. And I'm like, to be honest, Matt, if it's not Brett Hull or Wayne Gretzky, I'm not going to know who these guys are anyway. Mm-hmm. And he goes, well, okay, you might know who they are. And so from there, he sets me up with these guys. I ended up getting a call from a gentleman named Kelly Chase. And Kelly Chase was an enforcer for the Blues for 13 years.
Got it.
At the same time as Holy. And him and Holy and Gretzky are all, they're like the Three Musketeers. They're thick as thieves. And so I talked to Kelly, and Kelly put this group together, and I was fortunate enough to get set up with him through Matt. Turned out to be a really great group of guys. We got Barrett Jackman's also one of our partners as well. And so we've got this nice little core of, ex-hockey players. And like you mentioned, St. Louis is a big hockey town.
Oh, yeah.
And it worked out great for me because I got to St. Louis in 2019, and they ended up winning the Stanley Cup in 2019.
Yeah, wow.
So
big party.
It was a nice little introduction into the St. Louis area. So even though I was going from Hermosa Beach to Osage Beach, as I like to joke with people, and they both end in beach, but they're very different.
Sure.
It was a nice setup. And so, we first started with our production facility down in Vienna, which is located in the Ozarks in Missouri. Mm-hmm. Built out that facility, essentially during COVID, which was nice. Nice from my standpoint because I was working the whole time. So I didn't really experience the same COVID that everybody else did. We were, putting that facility up and doing that. Then from there, we opened up our 3 retail locations and really haven't looked back since. So that's, the Reader's Digest version of my cannabis journey and how I ended up in Missouri and really with the group of guys that I ended up with as well. And, it's been pretty special because, they got into it really because Kelly had a brain lesion at one time. And so they were searching for different options and how to treat it. And they started looking at CBD and THC and the medical benefits behind that. He's the president of the Retired Players Association, and he's also a 2-time cancer survivor at this point as well.
Wow.
And so it's been nice. I've noticed this in my own health journey. I suffered from Lyme disease and had a lot of issues. I was in a wheelchair for a while, and what I've found with cannabis in general is that, they always, we grew up, or at least I grew up in the DARE era.
Oh, yeah, totally.
Cannabis was a gateway drug.
Yes, sir.
Right? And
you saw the same scrambled egg videos I did.
Exactly.
Yeah.
This is your brain on drugs.
Mm-hmm.
But what I really do believe it is a gateway But I think it's more of a gateway to alternative thoughts and alternative medicines, right?
Yes.
So I think where people see medical marijuana, now they're more comfortable to find other alternative treatments that may help people. So I think it's been, a huge benefit. Cannabis has been not just the direct effects of cannabis, but how it's opened people's minds to look for alternative ways to treat themselves.
Yeah, I agree. A lot of cool stuff in there, Nick. I appreciate you sharing your story like that, going from the Midwest here all the way to the West Coast to beautiful Hermosa Beach. My sister, when she was training for work, stayed there a few years ago in the summer, and my wife and I went to go visit her, and cousin lived in Manhattan Beach as well. So like I've spent a lot of time in that area, and it is gorgeous. I can imagine how hard it was to leave, but now back into the Midwest, but still in a nice place like the Ozarks, like you're talking about, and helping build up a market that is now just kind of getting its legs under it in Missouri and all of that. But you were just speaking about the great alternative that cannabis is. And I talk a lot about that on the show. And I like the point you made about how it's a gateway, not necessarily to other drugs, the way that the DARE officers preached to all of us for a long time, but it can be a gateway to an altered state, or a gateway away from some of the pharmaceuticals or some of the negative parts of Western medicine that a lot of us are prescribed and have to deal with. And that's not just the insurance industry, but it's big pharma as well. And there's a lot of people who are prescribed multiple, different pills, and then those have side effects. And it's something I go through on the show a lot. And if cannabis can kind of help you recover from what it is you're dealing with or with those symptoms, sometimes it offers people an off-ramp from the 10, 20 pills, over the course of a week or a month that they're taking based on the recommendation of their doctor. Cannabis can solve not just the side effects from those, but maybe the original thing you got that prescription for. And so that is incredible. And you also have this viewpoint into these former athletes, these guys that played hockey. And I've spoken with former athletes on the show. And there was a former Hawks player, Daniel Carcillo, Carbomb, who also had a lot of brain injuries after his career. Issues with sight, all kinds of sensory stuff like that. Couldn't have a conversation with his wife and kid. Just all this bad stuff. And then by using CBD, THC, these cannabis products, along with like some other alternative medicine, it's not only do you see this person get a new lease on life, and it sounds like you had a bit of an experience the same way, and that's kind of the power that cannabis can really offer to people. But we're still dealing with this stigma. We're still dealing with trying to normalize this thing. Education is a big part of letting people know what quality of life benefits await them if they are to give cannabis a try and kind of get past the brainwashing that I talk about that we all got in the 1900s and stuff like that. And I want to ask you, coming from the beverage space, not only did you have this journey yourself in discovering the healing power of cannabis and whatnot, but you came from an industry that is also a competitor for cannabis right now, that being alcohol. And what I want to ask is what's your perspective on these cannabis beverages? Because I love smoking flower. I still do it a lot, but beverages, as I know you know well, they're so baked into our social structure. Anytime you do a dry month or somebody does dry January, you go to a party and you're the only one without a drink in your hand, you get side-eye. You get these looks like, hey, why aren't you drinking? And then you give a perfectly legitimate reason and you might still get some pushback. And I feel like cannabis beverages are an opportunity to move cannabis into that space that is so socially occupied by alcohol it had on its own for a while. What's your opinion about cannabis beverages, and are you guys looking to offer some of those in the future?
I think you're spot on there from a... just being, that's something that we all do culturally. It's kind of baked into our society, as you said. I think that you're going to see low-dose beverages or low-dose THC beverages. In my opinion, I think they're most likely going to be, federally legalized to the point where probably 5 milligrams, a 5 milligram, 12 ounce THC beverage, you're going to see everywhere. And I do think people are going to be doing that because that is, one of those social norms, and that's just something that's kind of baked into society. you go out, you have beverages. And what I don't think we're going to have is, one, I don't think it'll be legal, but I don't think you're going to have the 100 milligram drinks and people doing that, because I don't think the average person can handle that.
Sure.
So, do I think that it's going to become a big category? Yes. Within the legal or the licensed space, cannabis space, I don't think the 5 milligram drinks that we're talking about are probably going to be a big category driver for us. And the main reason for that is I've never been to a dispensary that's built for it. And I've never seen a distribution model that's built for it either. And the thing is, beverages are big and they're bulky.
Yeah.
Growing up in the beverage industry, you can, obviously I've handled a lot of beverages throughout my life. I've launched several beverage brands, but if you look at, you go outside in Chicago or wherever you're located, you're going to see Coke trucks, you're going to see Budweiser trucks, you're going to see Miller trucks. And the reason that you're not going to see Oscar Mayer Wiener hot dog trucks.
Right.
You're not going to see like a Nabisco truck with crackers. You're not going to see, a Cheerios truck. It's because those are smaller CPG items that can get thrown onto a single pallet, and they're all coming from a common food distributor. Beverages are so big that they have to go on a unique truck and everything else, and you have to go with a distributor that's strictly built for beverages. And so I don't see that. I don't see the cannabis space just doesn't have the infrastructure for it. And so I don't see that happening within the our cannabis markets or really any cannabis market throughout the country. I just don't think that's where the customer lives for it either. I mean, you're talking about people having, really these social gatherings and stuff. When they do that, they're used to going to the liquor store.
Yep.
They're used to going to the convenience or the grocery store to do that. I also think that the people that work at those stores are also used to selling things to people that are 21 and over.
Sure.
So I don't think there needs to be a fear that all of a sudden these THC drinks are going to end up in the hands of minors.
Right.
I also don't think that your average everyday cannabis customer, your average everyday, non-cannabis customer is going to be searching for anything bigger than 5 milligrams.
Yeah.
Where you go into our dispensaries, they might want the 100, 200 milligram drinks, and I think our dispensaries are the right place to find those as well. So I think that's going to be kind of the split between, you want the low dose items, you're likely to go to your mainstream stores. You want, your high octane products, you're going to still need to go to a dispensary to get those.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think that makes a lot of sense. And I do think we're already kind of seeing that divide where you're seeing some of the stronger beverages for those with a built-up tolerance going to dispensaries and getting those 20, 50, 100 milligram cans. But it also, here in Chicago, we do have some hemp beverages that are in the liquor stores now. And this division that we were just kind of talking about how cannabis is so heavily regulated in states where it's legal, federally still prohibited completely. But this farm bill from 2018 did legalize hemp up to a certain threshold, that 0.3% THC. That has allowed some products, like beverages, like some others, to sweep the country a little bit. And there is now this back and forth. Here in Illinois, it's a big issue between the governor of the state and the mayor of Chicago. Do we ban these intoxicating hemp products outright? Do we regulate them? And it's this tug of war between what's the direction that we're going in. I want to get your take on this, Nick, as somebody who's been across different states, somebody, again, with very much experience in beverage and whatnot. What's your stance on the hemp products versus cannabis and where we go from here?
Well, first, I think it's just a gross misunderstanding on the difference between hemp and cannabis, because at the end of the day, there is no difference.
Yes.
It's the same product. It's the same plant.
Right.
There's absolutely zero difference. So I think that, just the nomenclature itself, I think confuses people.
Agreed.
And it confuses regulators, because I think when a regulator hears hemp, they think of the stalks of the plants, they think of the fibers. Everything's coming from the flower.
Right.
That's where it's coming from. And the 0.3% THC, I mean, like I said, I got a 40,000 square foot production facility. Every flower I grow, if I want it to, it can have 0.3% THC, because what people don't understand is the plant produces THCA and THC.
Right.
And THCA converts to THC as soon as it's combust.
Right.
So as soon as you light that joint or whatever it is, that 0.3%, jumps up to 30%.
Right.
And so all you got to do is harvest the plants a little bit early, and in some strains just will never get above that 0.3%. So that 0.3%, when they're talking about that, they're talking about THC delta 9. They're not talking about total THC.
Right.
That's something that they slid past the regulators, because the regulators did not understand what they were regulating.
Yeah.
And they likely didn't, talk to people that did understand. So because 0.3% doesn't sound like a whole lot.
Right.
The next thing, when you're talking 0.3%, when you're talking beverages, or you're talking a gummy or anything like that, 0.3% THC in a beverage in a 12-ounce can is, I don't know the math off the top of my head, but I know it's over 1,000 milligrams of THC could be in a single 12-ounce can.
Wow.
And it could be 0.3% THC, because it's weight to volume.
Yes.
And that's another thing that regulators just didn't understand when they were saying, because what they were thinking was the whole thing, every ounce of that was going to be 0.3%. That's not the case.
Right.
So you could have a lot, I would never want to give anybody 1,000 milligrams of THC in one dose.
Yeah.
Because they're probably never going to come back and shop again, because they're going to have a terrible experience.
Right. Right.
Now, there's some people out there who might enjoy that, but that's going to be few and far between.
Correct.
So I think those are the things where there's mass confusion over what they're actually regulating. It is the same exact thing. My recommendation, if I were doing this, would be, I think it's sensible, the 5 milligrams per 12 ounces per 12 fluid ounces, I would probably make legal everywhere. I think that makes a lot of sense. It's something that people that most consumers should be able to handle. I'm sure some people are more sensitive to things than others.
Yeah.
And it's something that you could get actual good distribution on through a traditional beverage distributor. Outside of that, like I said, the regulated cannabis space, just the dispensaries don't have the room for it, and the trucks don't have the room for it as well. So I think that would be a sensible compromise.
What about those names? Like the nomenclature we're talking about? Like, do you think we should just stop saying hemp and cannabis and put it all under the same roof?
I mean, it makes a lot of sense to me. I mean, I've gone back and forth with the state of Missouri on some of these things and pointed out to my regulators, and not all of them understand it, because some of them have been in the cannabis space for a month.
Right.
They got on with the DCR or whoever else, and now they're regulating cannabis. So no fault of their own. They don't have the same ownership of the space in the way that a licensee would. But essentially, I could flip my entire facility tomorrow and give up my license and say and call it hemp, because it's the same product, and start selling my product all over the country, as long as I cut my THC levels below 0.3%, through harvest.
Yeah.
So, because everything in my facility, just like anything in anybody's facility, this isn't something unique to hippos. This is something that's out there for everybody, and I know that the state of Missouri is pushing to regulate all hemp products, and really a lot of that comes down to, you see like THCA flower for sale.
Yep.
So I want access for everybody. I think everybody should have the chance to enjoy cannabis. I think the great thing, there's a lot of things that the states that are regulating cannabis do a poor job on, but you can't do a great job on everything. But there's a lot of things they do great, and they've given everybody access that didn't have access. I think that's something that people often forget. Like, oh, I hate the regulated market. These people like, well, you didn't have the same ease of access that you do now. So don't hate it too bad.
Yeah, I think that's important to point out, because there's a lot of states where cannabis is still not legalized recreationally, and there are some that still don't have a medical program. So for some states, that's literally the people's medicine. That's what they can get, is these hemp products up to that point.
Absolutely. I saw Michael Beasley just got arrested. He was he was watching a K-State KU basketball game. I didn't like the outcome. I went to KU, but
I see on the hat there. Yep.
This guy gets arrested for having a little bit of weed in his pocket. I mean, which is crazy to me. This is, probably the best basketball player that ever played for K-State. He's like a hometown hero over there.
Yeah.
And a great NBA player gets arrested. So that stuff is still happening. So all these states that are regulated, you don't have to worry about any of that stuff.
Yeah.
The other thing is you have safe, tested product.
Yes.
And I think that's one of the things, Don. I'm sure that you feel the same way, and things that we just didn't know about. I think about growing up. Where did you buy weeds? You didn't buy a strain.
No.
You were going and buying Brett Hull number 16,
right,
or Orange Walker, or Dirty Bananas, or whatever the strain may be. You were going and buying weed.
You got whatever your dealer had. That exactly. Your options were limited based on your plug. And I talk about that all the time. People who come up in this day and age just don't understand the beauty of the options. They have their complaints about prices or whatever, but I'm like, being able to go into a dispensary, know that the stuff has been tested, that it's quality, pretty reliable in terms of terpenes and cannabinoid percentages, all that stuff. It is a beautiful world, and it's a different world based on which state you're in. And that's something that I think the hemp regulation, cannabis, whether it's rescheduling or whatever ends up happening here, this hodgepodge legalization that I talk about, it's just leading to so many headaches, so much frustration for people. You get your stuff in one legal state and you drive through an illegal state and you can get completely busted. Your life can be upended, like the example you just gave, and it's ridiculous. But I want to make sure people know, if you're in Missouri or you're traveling there, where can people find a store locator or whatever for all Hippo's dispensaries?
Yeah, so you can check us out on at hipposcannabis.com, or follow our Instagram at hipposcannabis. Again, we're located in Chesterfield, Columbia, or Springfield, Missouri. Would love to have you stop through our stores. We got a lot of great products, great varieties, and great pricing. Don, you touched on pricing. It always cracks me up when people complain about pricing. That's when I can tell how young somebody is, because 25 years ago or 20 years ago, I was paying $50 an eighth, and I was happy to pay for it.
Yep. Okay? Yes, sir.
And so it's like, if you can get, we don't have a $50 eighth in our store, and we've got stuff that's like 36% THC. So
right.
The fact that you can pick up something that's already been tested, it's in beautiful packaging, it's not dried out, it's in a climate controlled vault, and you have a large variety to choose from, and it's $35 or $30 or $25, or I think the highest flower we got is $40 on the shelf.
Wow.
I'm thinking, you're young, you have you don't remember the times when you had to pay for a $50 eighth, and that was a $50 eighth that you paid for and you could get arrested for.
Absolutely.
This is $35 eighth that you're not going to get arrested for. It's safe, it's tested. It's pretty tough to beat the way that the cannabis, the evolution of cannabis is kind of where it's come from and to where it is now.
Yeah, I totally agree, and it is a beautiful world that we're in right now, and I know that I hear a lot of those price complaints here in Illinois specifically. I know the taxes are a little high, and I've heard from, God knows, plenty of people who drive up to Michigan and just love to gloat about the price deals they got. Head on over across the border to Missouri now and check out one of Hippo's dispensaries, because it sounds like you get some great products there, and I know you're going to get some price relief compared to what's over here in the land of Lincoln. And as we mentioned, you can head to hipposcannabis.com to find out where those stores are in those localities of Missouri. But Nick Ranella, thanks so much, CEO of Hippos, for stopping by today and sharing your perspective, your journey, and telling us a little about legal cannabis.
It's a pleasure, Don. Thanks for having me.
And there you have it, listener. I want to thank my guest, Nick Ranella, CEO of Hippo's Cannabis in Missouri. Head to that website, check out where you can find their products. Really looking forward to giving those a try myself. It sounds like their approach, it sounds like Nick's expertise coming from the alcohol space and also his time spent out in California really learning from the ground up and that distribution model that they had there. I believe his experience in both of those lanes is going to serve them very well. Now, on to this week's news wrap-up. I want to share a few stories with you, and it's kind of a mixed bag this week. The first one is kind of wide-focusing. This is from marijuanamoment.net, a publication I reference a lot on the show. This was published June 9th, Monday of this week, by Kyle Yeager. Headline is, marijuana users are nearly 5 times as likely to regularly exercise than eat fast food. Stereotype busting survey shows. The article goes on. I've linked it below if you want to follow along or read for yourself later if you might be driving or working out or bicycling or something like that while listening to this. Marijuana consumers are more than 3 times more likely to regularly exercise than drink alcohol, and they're nearly 5 times more likely to routinely work out than eat fast food, according to another stereotype-defying survey. The poll from the cannabis telehealth platform NugMD looked at the habits of cannabis users who were asked about the frequency they engage in 7 different activities, from alcohol consumption to movie theater attendance. One of the takeaways was that marijuana consumers reported regularly engaging in exercise, 27.4% daily, 34.9% multiple times per week, significantly more than using alcohol, which was 6.1% daily and 11.3% multiple times per week. Another finding from the survey was that cannabis consumers are 4.8 times more likely to regularly exercise than eat fast food, 1.5% daily and 11.5% multiple times per week for the fast food eating. Here's a quote from Andrew Graham, head of communications at NugMD. He told Marijuana Moment, quote, "This finding is yet more evidence that today's cannabis consumers defy the prohibitionist stereotype of layabouts munching Doritos then cross-fading with booze to get their fix." End quote from Mr. Andrew Graham. I could not agree more. That's all the article I'm going to read. There's plenty more context there and more data from the study if you're interested. Again, I have linked that below. But as Andrew Graham just laid out there in the statement, this is something that I've been saying on the show for the past 3 years. If you've been listening to this at all, it's the fact that the prohibitionist language and the propaganda that came out last century of the images from the sort of dare education and the government's messaging on cannabis of this couch-gripping layabout, stoned out of their mind, incapable of really marshaling their faculties to do anything at all, even change the TV channel with the remote. That was never true, so it's not even antiquated. It was totally fiction always, but the fact that that stereotype still exists, it really just gets at that story that we were told and sometimes how hard it is to break the imagery that a story can lay into our minds like this. This article and this topic struck my attention because I and a lot of stoners that I know are regular exercisers. And I was just kind of making the point that alcohol isn't really playing as big a role in my life as it was. Cannabis plays a huge role in that. And the exercise portion of it, that's been something that I've done, regularly since high school and college. And then I fell off a bit in my mid to late 20s and really got back at it in my early 30s and have continued to keep it as a part of my routine ever since, not because I'm chasing some kind of weight goal or body image in particular. I do it because of how it makes me feel. I have lived plenty of my life without doing it, and the days that I don't do it, I do not like the way that I feel. And exercise is one of the tools that I use to get me into a place that I enjoy how I feel, and it sets me up a solid foundation for my day. So I do it in the morning, at least half an hour, sometimes an hour if I can swing it. Then I've also mentioned this routine on the show. I do 10 minutes of meditation. I use this free app Insight Timer. I set a little bed with a babbling brook noise and some birds and wind chimes and what have you. You can make your own. But the point is, I just focus on my breath. Breathe in through the nose, deeply out through the mouth. You can count the seconds of your inhales and exhales, and you practice exercising, clearing your mind. Thoughts come up, unbidden, they always do. You return to the breath, you focus on it, and you keep your mind as clear of thoughts for as long as you can. And when you realize that a thought has taken your attention again, you return to the breath. I do that for 10 minutes, and then I take like a cold shower upstairs, and then I get on with my day. That routine, which is exercise, is the most critical part of that, though. If I miss the other things, I can meditate later, I can do the cold shower at a different point, or if I just take a regular shower, whatever, that's not that big a deal. The key component of it all is the exercise. When I was in my 20s and my late teens, one of the things I was doing a lot of was running. And one of my favorite things to do was take a volcano vaporizer. If you have any idea what that is, it's one of those ones that looks kind of like a small cone that is placed wide side down on a table, and you strap a plastic bag to the mouth of it, and the bag fills up with vapor. You pack the little head and you toast it at a temperature, and the bag gets filled with vapor. Then when it's full, you unclip the bag and you put on a mouthpiece, and then you just inhale from the bag. Pass it around the room or take it down all yourself, whatever. The reason I bring this up is because what I would do frequently was use that volcano vaporizer, hit a bag or two, and then go out for a run for like half an hour, especially in the evening, running around the streets of Chicago. It was Lincoln Park at the time, and then Evanston and some other areas of this city. There have been some documented studies that have shown a relationship between the endocannabinoid system in our bodies, the receptors that receive cannabinoids, and its similarities to the endorphins released when you exercise and particularly when you run. The runner's high expression seems to be literally backed by science. There is a relationship there. And so that was something that I always enjoyed doing. I kind of want to get back to that, to be honest, but it's not just running that benefits from it. Lifting weights is something that I also do as kind of like part of my routine. Everyone's got different, exercise stuff. Not one, in my opinion, is any better than the other. My preference is just, cardio might be the elliptical or taking a run. And then for, resistance and weight training, I just do regular old exercises of lifting is what I was taught in high school. And I've just kind of kept going with it. It works for me. But I've always found over the years that cannabis, when you kind of consume it in the right amount and at the right time, whether it's before your workout, it can sometimes help with focus. If you don't smoke too much or consume too much, then it won't wreck your motivation, which I know a lot of people struggle with. But if you have that motivation maintained, I have found that cannabis can help you dial in a little bit more intently to the muscle groups that you might be targeting with those specific exercises. So that's something, again, this is all anecdotal. I'm just talking about my own experience here. So take that for what you will. But if you smoke after the workout, I think it's more common knowledge that it's great for recovery stuff. Helps your body feel a little bit better. The soreness and the tiredness might not be taking so much out of you. Either way, there is a lot of positive connection, I think, and I found in my life. Again, this is my opinion here, but I have seen the connection between exercise and cannabis. And so this study that Marijuana Moment is citing from NUG-MD, the 5 times as likely to regularly exercise than eat fast food, this tells me that I'm not alone in this. I believe that there are many people out there who have found this connection to be true for themselves. I don't know that there is a causation here or a causality, whatever the proper word is for that. Correlation does not equal causality. I think there's clearly a correlation here between marijuana and exercise, but the causality, whether one causes the other, that's obviously not clear. I don't know that it'll ever be. But I thought this was a fascinating study and I wanted to share it with you. So again, I've linked that below. I encourage you to check that out for yourself. And the next 2 stories have to do with Arkansas specifically. This is a state with, it seems like a pretty complicated relationship with cannabis here. The positive one first is that Arkansas citizens, Arkansans, this headline says from KARK.com, a news website here, Arkansans consuming more than 6,000 pounds of marijuana a month in 2025. This article was published by Alex Keeneland on June 5th, so last week from when I'm recording this. Little Rock. The most recent figures from the Department of Finance and Administration show marijuana consumption in Arkansas is increasing this year. The figures through May show that over 6,000 pounds a month of cannabis are purchased from state dispensaries. Records show that revenues range from a low of $21.9 million in February to a high of $25.5 million in May. And that is the most recent figure for 2025. The total pounds of cannabis sold through May is 32,474, which is up from 30,000 for the same period last year. Something interesting there. So Arkansans, clearly, just like everywhere else, people there really like their cannabis. The people that know that that's their thing, they're into it. But at the same time, the Arkansas Times here on the arctimes.com website says the cannabis industry is frustrated by a veto shooting down dispensary windows. This article from Griffin Coop was published Monday, June 9th. And this article goes into a lot of the backstory of the events that led up to this, which I think is very, very helpful. I'm not going to go through all of it here, just in the interest of saving some time. I've linked this below as well. I usually try and do that with all the articles that I share with you. But what matters here, the meat of this story, is that there was a House Bill 1889, which would have permitted dispensaries to install bank-style delivery drawers to serve qualified patients. During the COVID-19 pandemic, Governor Asa Hutchinson allowed dispensaries to offer curbside pickup, but the state no longer allows that service. The bill also would have allowed dispensaries to offer tours to invited guests. Man, how sweet would that be? They're doing brewery tours, like why not be able to get into a dispensary and show how they make these things? Smell some product. Come on, people. The bill passed each chamber by a razor-thin margin, passed the House with the minimum 51 votes in favor, and the Senate with 19 votes in favor, just one more than the minimum required to pass the bill there. After moving through both chambers, it was on its way to becoming law, or so it seemed. On April 16th, Governor Sarah Sanders vetoed the bill. One of only 4 vetoes she doled out in the 2025 legislative session. Sanders' killing of the bill came as a shock to Republican State Representative Aaron Pilkington, a Republican from Knoxville, the bill's lead sponsor. Quote from Pilkington, "I feel like I was totally sucker punched." He told that to the Arkansas Times the morning after the veto. Quote, "The whole time I was running it, I never heard there was any opposition from the governor's office. I would have gladly worked with them to address any concerns." End quote. The Arkansas Cannabis Industry Association supported the bill from the start and met with the governor's staff to discuss the bill, and they said they expressed no concerns. So I guess I bring this up, and that's all I'm going to read of the article. Again, there's lots more there, so I encourage you to read it for yourself and really get the meat of this if you're interested. But I use this to illustrate a point. This is one state where clearly a lot of people, or at least the people who are enjoying cannabis, are consuming a lot of cannabis. They're buying it from these state dispensaries. And this is speaking as somebody in Illinois. We do not have these drive-through dispensary windows either, and I think that would be great. But it kind of illustrates in a small way within one state this dichotomy, this tug of war, push and pull of people who support legal cannabis and want it in their state, and the people continuing to resist it for whatever reason. That fight is playing out all across America and all across the world still. We are seeing the ripple effects of the support for legalizing cannabis in states across America and in countries like Germany, and on the medical side of things like Ukraine and Poland. And we've seen Thailand flip-flop on this issue kind of within its own country, showing the complications and the sort of feelings on both sides of this. It's not simple. You know, I get it. A lot of these societal issues and kind of prohibiting something and trying to wrestle with morality and ethics and what's right and wrong, people who try and make these things out to be simple are usually trying to sell you something. If these things were simple, they would be solved immediately. They're not simple. There's a lot to them. And I understand people's reasonings, I think, a lot of them anyway. I do get people's fears around cannabis. And for me, a lot of that goes back to the unfortunate story, a lot of which was false, in my opinion, from last century, and that propaganda in the Reefer Madness era and the anti-drug DARE education during the height of the war on drugs and thereafter. We're still feeling those ripple effects and the resistance from a lot of these people to kind of acquiesce to what seems to be a majority of most populations that want cannabis legal, at the very least medically, and oftentimes recreationally for adults, as much as that support is out there, the resistance is absolutely out there as well. And only time will tell which way this is going to go. But either way, it is an exciting time, and I think it's about time to wrap this episode up, as I like to do, with a high haiku. Read by my man, Reg Kiefer. Take it away, Reg.
I'm seeing stars, man. Oh, they twinkle. 2 years, still blazing. Unexpected snacks, delight. Legends light the way. I see what you did with the writing there, Don. You kind of brought the themes of the episode together here at the end. I like it.
Thanks, Reg. Yeah, that's what I tried to do. I'm glad you picked up on that, man.
I read stuff sometimes. I know I don't seem like it, but...
Yeah, that's okay. Anyway, just get out of here, and thanks for reading that, like always, and thank you, listener, for sticking around and listening to this episode of the Cannabis Man podcast. Be sure to leave a rating or review, comment, subscribe to the show on whichever platform you check this out on. Follow the show on social media and leave a comment or send a text or voicemail to 872-269-2403 and tell me about your best High Minded Food Pairings. Cheese and chocolate sounding pretty good to me again right here at the end of the episode. Let me know some of your favorite combos. And a big thanks to my guest Nick Ranella of Hippo's Cannabis in Missouri. Check out their website, find out where their products are nearest you. Really cool to kind of hear the origin story for Nick and for their company. I think their expertise as well as their philosophies on the products are going to serve them pretty well, and I look forward to seeing the future of where they go, as well as all of legal cannabis, as we watch this green frontier change and shift under our feet every single day. It's an exciting time, and I just want to thank you for following it along with me here on the Cannabis Man podcast. We'll talk next week. Bye-bye. Cannabis Man is 100% originally crafted by myself, Don Kleppen. Original theme music written and composed by Yusu Kim, aka Goodson.